Hi, I'm Francina,
I'm Jackie.
and welcome to the Rest, Love, and Justice podcast.
This podcast is an inquiry into whether rest and love and justice can produce transformative social change. The dominant narrative is this overwork and this glorification of it, especially in the justice space. And here, we're going to question that notion.
Come sit with us as we meet our collective humanity and share stories around rest, love, and justice. It is our hope to create a shift that enables us to recognize that racial justice work is a human issue. It affects us all. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rest, Love, and Justice podcast. I am one of the co-hosts, Francina Call, and this is my beautiful co-host,
Jackie Gal.
and we are so excited to have you here for this episode of the Vibe Out that we read a quote somewhere that said, Black offerings do not need to be steeped in struggle. And I tell you, it just knocked the wind out of me because I was like, whoa, how much of our offerings are emerging from struggle and not from joy? And I started kind of tracking for myself, like, how much I'm digging out of my struggle to create healing in the world. I think it's a beautiful thing, but our offerings do not have to be limited to that and do not predominantly have to be steeped in the things that are not well in our lives, but that they can come from the things that are actually going well. And I actually started like thinking about how many times that I hold myself back. And I think, Black people listening to this, or brown people in general listening to this, you may resonate with some of this. I love to travel and I have to overcome a piece of myself to share about my joy when I'm traveling, because I don't want to be perceived as being a show off or being somebody who is, flashy or anything like that. And again, perceived means that I'm thinking about what other people are going to think about my joy. And yet I think it's essential for our joy to be witnessed. And we live in a society where people seeing us happy and joyful is not normalized. And I was like, we need to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And like on vacation and enjoying the world. Exactly. Like it doesn't have to be, I think that's why I think language is so important here too. Like when we talk about, just racial equity too, like we're not talking about like pity or someone needs to be white saviorism obviously could definitely come in with here, but like, no, it's actually just talking about the truth of what shifts need to happen, but also knowing that there's resistance, agency, joy, like travel, abundance, brilliance, like all of that in the conversation too.
Yep. And I feel like there's a lot of notoriety and attention that was given to Black people, to Indigenous people, especially in the 2020 racial uprisings. And suddenly I feel like there was this huge shift that people were now listening to us for the first time. And so it was beneficial for us to dig out of our own stories, our own struggles. And then, people developed whole platforms and businesses now becoming DEI educators and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm seeing now a sharp decline, because there's so much backlash for it, which that in and of itself is another vibe out in a conversation that we can have, that why is DEI being attacked in this moment, right? But beyond that, it kind of made us feel like we had to live in the place of struggle so that we could continue to be paid attention to. And I think that we need to dismantle that for people of color, because we don't have to live there for our offerings to be witnessed. We don't have to live there for our offerings to matter and to create the change that we need in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've heard the term like trauma porn, right? Like it doesn't need to be consumed. It's like, it doesn't, it just can be like talking about the beauty, the joy, the brilliance. Obviously, we're not sidestepping or bypassing the fucked up oppressive history. Yeah. And we can leave room for many stories, many conversations.
And so I would challenge people that are listening to this podcast to think about all the people of color accounts that you follow on Instagram. are they steeped in struggle, or are you following people that are comedians and people that are dancers and people that are singers and people that are chefs and people that are gardeners? I mean, there's just this whole world that I feel like is untapped, and a lot of people, and I was noticing on my page, so many of the Black people that I follow are teaching people about our struggle, right? And for me as a consumer, I feel like, oh, it helps me to see somebody talking about the thing that is real for me, right? But there's a whole nother segment and so many other facets to what makes us beautiful, right? And being able to express it and then celebrate it for people. It breaks my heart every time I go on a trip and I have several people that will go on my Instagram and say things like, "You're going again? You're always traveling." And, my company is Be Still Tea, and I'm always talking about stillness and being still to reflect on your life, to listen to your life, right? And I had somebody say to me once, for somebody who talks about stillness, you're not that still, right? Which kind of felt like a dig, right? And I'm like, why is my expression of my joy and living out my passion something that requires commentary from another person? If you don't like to see me on the travel streets, you ain't got to follow me. I'm just like
Yes.
There's no room.
No.
There's no room. But if I'm talking about my struggle, then everybody is all ears, I mean, and for some people who have followed me on social media, I talk a lot about how my company Be Still Tea was birthed out of my trauma, right? I struggled with suicide. And it was in that season of struggle where my therapist would send me home to say, listen to your life. What are you feeling? How old do you feel? And tea was the thing that made me still enough to feel, right? That is birthed out of struggle, for sure. But I created this whole platform to invite other people to listen to their lives. If I'm getting stuck at the trauma piece, then we're all stuck in the trauma. And I really hope that brown people listening to this can release themselves, that they can release themselves from the need to stay holding on to the trauma so that you can be witnessed in life and be able to release it so you can bring in goodness. People should be able to celebrate us doing good things. People should be able to celebrate us in full joy. Like me walking around Jamaica was full joy for me, right? And I think we need to normalize more of that and not only looking at us from the perspective of what can we learn from the traumas that Black people are still living today.
Yeah, still an important piece, and there's room for a bigger conversation. And I just want to say too that, as we've said many times on this podcast, like there are infinite ways to rest, and everyone has a different, rest practice that's sustainable and great for them. And the same with stillness. Like if your stillness is actually finding stillness while traveling, something that you love, I know you, and you love travel more than maybe anyone I know. And I have a travel addiction myself, so I know, but like, it's just like you can be still the way you want to. And I know you know that, but for other people too, you can rest the way you want to, you can be still, you can listen to your life the way you want to. It's not prescribed by someone else onto you. So I think that's important. And I really like that offering, like look at whether it's social media, like, or not, where are you consuming media or conversations? What books?
Yeah.
Who are the authors of the books that you're reading?
Right.
Are they a bunch of white people, or is there a variety of stories that you're consuming? And I think that's a really good practice. If this might be a shorter podcast, so maybe everyone take a few minutes after that and just really kind of write down and think about what you're consuming and how much is steeped in struggle, and how much is maybe in the joy and abundance of life in general.
And I will say, to be honest, my love for travel and the exploration that I have for travel is birthed from what I didn't have as a child. And my stillness journey has allowed me to sit with my life to say, what were the things that I always wanted to do that I didn't get to do as a child, right? What are the things that were out of bounds for me that I couldn't even dream possible for me? travel was one of them. Seeing the world was one of them. It was always that what rich people got to do, right? The white people in our world, they were traveling. They were going on airplanes. My family, not so much. And I think we went on like one trip growing up. And I think that kind of opened me up to be like, I wonder if it's possible for me to see the whole world, you know? Like, can I go to Asia? Can I go to South America? Can I go? And the answer every time I sit in stillness is yes, I can. And I want that for my children. And I realize that for some people it's overwhelming, and that's okay. There's room for that for you. You're on your own journey. There's room for you to explore that. But don't limit another person's joy and exploration of that joy because you're not able to do that, you know. And that's why I think it's important for us to have this vibe out, to just kind of have that nibble of a conversation. That's what our vibe outs are. It's a nibble. It's short. It's sweet. Gives you something to think about, and think about how are you creating limitations in other people's lives because of what you don't feel like you can do for yourself, and how can you create expansion in other people's lives as you expand for yourself. Yeah.
Love it.
All right. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. And we hope that, you continue to live this conversation, this work that we bring forward out in ways that are meaningful to you and your community. Thanks for joining us today. Peace and love.
And that is our show for this week. This episode was produced by The City Music. As for me, I'm Jackie Gao, and thanks to my co-host, Francina Call.
May you move through this week embodying rest, love, and justice in ways that are meaningful to you and your community. Thanks for joining us today. Peace and love.